What is amazing is that the Iraqi parliament is being frozen out of much of the discussion. This is very dangerous, as the current Iraqi government has very little legitimacy. The result will likely increase the possibility of further fighting inside the fragile nation. Eric Lever, Institute for Policy Studies.
Welcome back to Inside Iraq. Our discussion today, what lies behind the declarations of principles of cooperation and friendship between Washington and Baghdad, and whether that relationship will add to the stability of Iraq as well as the region. Phyllis Bennis, in your introductory remark, you alluded that those bases somehow they will be used not only for internal security, but they might be used as a jumping board outside Iraq, perhaps towards Iran.
I think there is no question that the U.S., under the Bush administration in particular, has wanted to establish bases in a very crucial region, a region that is unstable, a region that is important because of oil, and a region that is important because of its strategic location. The bases in Iraq allow Iraq to serve as almost a large floating aircraft carrier, if you will, where the U.S. control of those bases will allow it free reign throughout that region. And it's something that I think is part of the reason that there is opposition to the bases and to the agreement that is being signed between Bush and Maliki by members of the Iraqi parliament
itself. But Mark just told us that it is temporary and it's used primarily. This is an American habit. Wherever they go, they build large bases only to leave them later on.
They don't leave them all later on. If we look at Japan, if we look at South Korea, if we look at Germany, the bases remain. Just a couple of months ago, there was a meeting in Ecuador of people from 40 different countries mobilizing against the presence of U.S. bases in their countries because they are seen as destabilizing local communities. They are taking money. They are shredding social rights. Women's rights have been uprooted through the process of building these bases, and there is a big movement among civil society.
If that is the case, Mark, can you understand why the Iranians are upset about the presence of 130,000 American troops on their back door?
Well, I don't think that's the case, and I'm most amused at the notion that the presence of the Americans in the Middle East is somehow shredding women's rights. You know, if there are American bases in Germany, it's because the German government, the elected German government, wants them there. If there are Germany's bases in Japan, it's because the elected government of Japan wants them there.
But that analogy, Mark, does not extend all the way to Iraq. Iraq never invited the U.S. Iraq is an occupied country, and there was not even a UN basis for that occupation.
I don't think you're going to find that in many Iraqi Shia who are going to say, "Oh, pretty please, bring back Saddam Hussein."
So it's reality by force, reality by diktat, is it?
I think they're quite content with the change. Now, there are certainly substantial disagreements and problems that exist between the Americans in Iraq and the Shia and the Kurds and certainly the Sunnis.
There's even a big problem between the government and the parliament. They have the parliament hasn't even been consulted on this.
I suspect what you will see is the agreement, whatever is finally worked out, will have real traction and will mean something if, in fact, it represents the interests of the majority of Iraqis, certainly the Shia and the Kurds.
But the problem is it doesn't, Mark, and I think you know that. The government itself
but if you see that is the case, I mean, I would say, well, no, that's a different issue.
It's not even consulting with the parliament.
If you think the Americans in Iraq are a good idea,
I'm talking about.
If you think the Americans in Iraq are a good idea, well, I disagree with you. I think the Americans in Iraq are a very good idea. And if there are going to be Americans in Iraq, you're going to have bases to house them. Now, the presence of those bases will largely, will in fact diminish as the stability in Iraq increases. I think it's a foregone conclusion that the Iraqi Shia community will certainly want the American presence to be diminished as it stabilizes.
That's a very good point, Mark. Let me run it to Phyllis.
Assuming that if I could just respond here, if you're assuming that the Iraqi Shia community is somehow one monolithic community. That is a huge community with huge divergence of political opinions. It includes Maliki, who has just signed unilaterally an agreement with President Bush without even consulting his own parliament. That was the subject of a congressional hearing here in Washington by Congressman Delahunt, looking exactly at this exclusion of the Iraqi parliament, who signed with a majority of parliamentarians a letter to Maliki saying this is not acceptable for us to be excluded from this, and calling on the United Nations not to accept Maliki's request to extend the mandate, calling on Maliki to consult with the parliament on any future agreement with the United States, something that has not been done. So the notion that this somehow is in agreement with the Kurds and the Shia, as though these were monolithic communities, really begs the reality of this very diverse, historically secular, let's be clear, country of Shia and Sunni and Kurds and Turkmens and Christians and Jews and others.
Actually,
so add to that, Mark, the Shiite community also includes a large segment of Iraqi resistance.
Indeed, it does.
Yeah, but
and
I mean,
think the fact of
if there really were serious opposition, and that serious opposition may develop, but if there really were serious opposition, you would have seen protests coming out of Najaf. I have not seen any as of yet. You would have seen Grand Ayatollah Sistani or the Hausa as a collective take opposition to this. You will see, in fact, the parliament
seriously, Mark.
You're
the one who thinks this government is serious. That's where the opposition is coming from.
You will see the parliament come into play. We've
seen their letters, we've seen their efforts, we've seen them trying to reach the UN directly.
No, we haven't.
We have indeed. We have indeed.
Give me a break.
Has there been a
statement? Has there been a statement from Abdulaziz Al-Hakim or from Mehdi saying that this is absolutely unacceptable?
Hakim is not the member of the parliament. I just said to you that this is coming from within the parliament. That's the point.
Yeah,
this is an elected government that you want to take seriously.
There are on any given issue in any given democracy, you are going to have members of parliament, members of the legislature.
Let me just add something to this, Mark, to Phyllis Bennis. Phyllis, the notion that you break it, you own it, does it carry any weight with you? The United States pretty much jumped into this China shop and destroyed the country. So at minimum, it has to stay till 2020. As the Iraqi defense minister says, we need the U.S. to protect our border.
No, the Iraqi defense minister needs the U.S. to protect his position in Iraq. The analogy that Colin Powell used, the Pottery Barn analogy, we broke it, we have to fix it, has never been applicable. The right analogy is the bull in the China shop. What do you do when the bull gets loose in the China shop and breaks half the cups? You don't ask the bull to stay in the China shop and fix the cups. You get the bull the hell out of the China shop.
And what happens if the bull is not willing to leave, Phyllis Bennis?
Well, that's the effort of the people of this country and people around the world, as well as the Iraqis, to say the U.S. does not belong.
Let us run this by Mark. Mark, the U.S. is the bull. Is the bull willing to leave?
Well, I don't think the U.S. is the bull. I mean, if you were to use that analogy, the bull would have to be the Iraqi Sunni community, which fueled the insurgency and did not want to let loose of the privileges it had gained over a long period of time. You now have that insurgency more or less under control. The Americans had been highly negligent and not developing and deploying a counterinsurgency strategy. She just told you it is temporary. There will be setbacks. Iraqi resistance will come back if this current Iraqi government does not play ball with the Iraqi people.
Resistance fighters now being paid by the United States. How long is that going to last?
See. I mean, the Iraqi Sunni community is not going to bring down Iraq. If the insurgency starts to flare again, then you will see the Shiite community once again go into arms. You will see the militias become active again, and then all hell will break loose. Now, that may, in fact, produce eventually an American exit. I'm somewhat skeptical about that. But let's be clear, it's not the United States is in Iraq bringing order, not disorder. So when, in fact, if that perception,
give her a chance, Mark. Give her a chance. Finish the thought,
okay.
Phyllis.
The polls taken by the State Department and the polls taken by the BBC and ABC News all indicated that the vast majority of Iraqis want the U.S. out either immediately, which is within 6 months, or within a year. That was over 80%. 61% support military attacks against U.S. troops. That, to me, says more than anything else about how U.S. troops are viewed as an occupying army.
No, I think that's pretty ridiculous. If the two of us went to Iraq, we could go into a Shiite mosque, ask one question, and then stay for about 3 hours, and by the end of that time, we'll have a completely different response. Polling is a highly inaccurate subject for Western democracies. To use polling as a basis for policy in a place like Iraq, recovering from years of totalitarian dictatorship, is just absurd.
On that notion,
again, you have to look for the big parallels here. And again, you started out making the parallel with 1920. I defy you to find real serious parallels with that. If there were a parallel with 1920, we would have seen the Iraqi Shia clergy rise en masse, which has always represented the interests of the larger community, and say to us clearly, get out of the country. We have not seen that. And what is consistently done here is the depiction of a very small part of the Iraqi community, the Sunni community, trying to be represented as the majority community. It is not. The Shia and the Kurds together represent over 80% of that population.
This is the very last statement by Phyllis Bennis. Go ahead, Phyllis, make it short and make it sweet.
The U.S. occupation in Iraq is not sweet, and it's not going to be short. That's the problem that we face. It is devastating that country, and it should end.
Phyllis Bennis from the Institute for Policy Studies, and Mark Gerecht, a fellow from the American Enterprise Institute. Thank you for being guests on Inside Iraq. To access the show and to send us your comments, please go to aljazeera.net/English. We have reached the end of this show. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Goodbye.